Good afternoon, everybody. This is Alexis with Recruiting Daily, and thank you for joining us again on a wonderful Tuesday afternoon. Today, we are going to talk about building your talent acquisition tech stack. Yay! A few little housekeeping items just for everybody. If you're new to the game, you are in listen only mode, meaning you can hear us, we cannot hear you. You're going to be hearing a couple voices today, but don't be alarmed. But they're not going to hear anything you say. So if you have opinions, you're going to have to put them in that little chat panel on the side. And you can also put your questions over there in the control panel as well. So please take notes, ask questions. The voices you'll be hearing cannot bite you. Join us, have fun, ask questions. Don't just sit there and be a lump. Here's our experts today. This is Amy Miller from Microsoft, cake maker extraordinaire. I'll let her talk a little bit about herself in a second. And joining her today is Ryan Leary from Recruiting Daily. You're probably used to hearing him. As you can see, there's a smaller picture of Ryan underneath his headshot. And actually, I'm just going to throw it over now to these experts right now. So, Amy, Ryan, you guys are going to take over. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Amy. Ryan, you can thank the sponsor, and let's just get going.
All right.
Go
Thank
for
you,
it, Amy.
Lex. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm Amy Miller. I'm a recruiter at Microsoft and I bake cakes on the side. It started out as just a hobby and has turned into a little bit of a side gig. So if this recruiting thing doesn't work out, I've got a backup plan.
Yeah. So, hey guys, what's going on? Ryan Leary. I'm with Recruiting Daily. You're probably sick of hearing my voice and getting my emails by now. But so before we kick off, I wanted to, not even really a story, but Amy has been around since, well, you've been around a long time, but you've been from the Recruiting Daily perspective and recruiting blogs way back in 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
And you've stuck around. And we were talking about this the other day. I don't know if we have a photo of it. Maybe we probably should have stuck it in there. We ran a contest many years ago and we gave away iPads when iPads were the hottest thing. And
Yes.
Amy was one of the winners, and she still has it today. You were saying,
I do. I do. It's chugging along. It doesn't really like to update anymore. It's been, gosh, 8 years maybe, but
yeah,
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 it's been a while. My
yeah,
baking
yeah. We'll
paid off.
have to we'll send the photo to everybody.
Perfect.
But
Should
yeah,
use that
so
as my
all right,
headshot.
so we've got a really fun webinar today. All of our webinars have been really good this year, and so before we kick off, I wanted to say thank you to the team at My Ally, for helping to make this possible for everybody. If you guys don't know about My Ally, check them out. They help with the recruiting coordination process through automation. They're not looking to replace you or your people. They're augmenting that process. In fact, and I would recommend highly checking them out. But I'll share a quick little thing before we jump in. When we first started working with My Ally, Deepti, who's one of the founder there, had sent an email and said, "Hey, I'm copying Alex in to help schedule some time to talk." And in the back of my mind, I thought, "Oh, yeah, it probably would most likely be their tool." And I didn't think about it. I just kind of went with it, and I was communicating back and forth. And then I started throwing some juggernauts in there, and by golly, he got us scheduled. I told him my flight was canceled and delayed. I need all this stuff, and it worked. So check it out. It's pretty fun. You can play with it. Go get your demos and things like that. But let's get moving.
All
Let's
right.
get this thing
Let's do
rocking. We're
it.
talking automation today. We're going to cover a lot of good key areas. Amy has so much background in this area. We're going to talk about the possibilities of automation, how it affects sourcing, where it can affect sourcing, what the outcomes will be, the communication process throughout the entire recruiting coordination process that takes place, whatever that may be in your organization. There's so many places for automation to fit. We're not just talking about scheduling interviews. We're talking a whole bunch of different process steps and automation possibilities to help augment that process. So I'm going to stop talking right now. We're going to pass it over to Amy, and I'm just going to kick you off real quick with that top question there. What should be automated? Maybe you don't want to answer that right away.
Yeah.
tell your story there.
For sure. Lot to say on this topic as a tech recruiter who gets bugged every day to demo this, demo that. Please try out this AI solution that's coming to take your job. Like that's the way you sell to me. Tell me that I suck and you're coming to take my job. So what should be automated? That should be the first and foremost question. What part of the process makes sense for you to automate? Short answer, anything that's super transactional, light touch. Right? So maybe it's scheduling. We'll get into some more specifics as we kind of go through the different phases of the recruiting life cycle, but there's definitely places that we can make this faster, better, cleaner, easier. That's where you should focus. We have to get out of the mindset that AI is going to take our jobs. There are definitely pieces of the recruiting process that should be very high touch, that should have direct communication, picking up the phone, all that old school stuff that us old crotchety recruiters complain about. Those things still need to happen. The goal is that amazing automation, whether it's interview scheduling, whether it's all through onboarding, all the things we're going to dig into, that's where you need to kind of focus your automation efforts and figuring out what works for you. We've tried to intentionally leave this discussion somewhat agnostic, and we're definitely counting on you guys, the audience, to ask your questions. You're coming from big companies, small companies, budget or no budget. You've got specific problems that you might want us to address. So throw those questions in the chat window. We will try to address them specifically. Ryan and I have played with a lot of different tools, so as much as, we don't necessarily want to go too far down certain specific company paths, we want to make sure you guys kind of know what the options are, and better yet, you can walk away from this discussion today with something that you can implement tomorrow, or someplace that you can demo, or just start thinking about how you can improve your own recruiting processes at your desk. So I think it's important to break down the recruiting lifecycle for a little bit, right? So kind of starting there. Usually sourcing comes first, right? And this is assuming you've got clients, you've got an open rec, whatever it may be, or maybe it's opportunistic sourcing. But really, I think sourcing is kind of the first step, first space, if you will, in the recruiting life cycle. Sourcing is interesting. I actually work with full-time sourcers. That's all they do. They're ear to the ground, they're attending conferences. That's really their 99% of their focus is engaging candidates. May or may not be for specific rec, but they're getting out there and they're talking to people live. The biggest challenge from where I sit and when I'm sourcing for my own stuff is there's so much information out there. People are not as hard to find as they once were. And I get some pushback on this, so I'm welcoming any dissension if you guys want to argue this with me. But I really believe there's tons and tons of data out there, from LinkedIn profiles to personal blogs to Google Scholar websites, wherever. There's so much information out there. Now the problem is, how do I make sense of this, and how do I put this in a format that helps me with my end goal, which is hiring a candidate? So shortlisting with technology. This, in my opinion, is a great place for AI automation to happen. There's a lot of different tools. There are people who do this really well. There's companies that have, should I name them, Ryan? I guess I have a name in the slide. But
that's fine,
there's definitely companies that do this really well. I did a demo for HireTool, which it's you guys can check it out. You can look it up and check it out. But we did a demo and it reduced my sourcing time. I mean, literally hours. I was able to shortlist within minutes candidates that were at least prospects. And so people that I could go back to my hiring teams with and say, hey, here's the kind of a bucket we can pick through. And let's look at these folks together and let's figure out who do we want to engage. The engagement piece, though, is then where you have to kind of pull back and say, okay, now the human element steps in. So minutes versus hours just to get to that short list, and all that time you've saved, now you can take that data and that short list that your AI tool gave you and really spend a lot of time crafting your message. So the automation happens before the candidate or the prospect is even touched. All right. Pros of this, clearly time saving, relevant data. You can pull, a lot of these tools will pull data from a lot of different sources. So you're not just limited to what's available in a LinkedIn profile or what's maybe in a public blog, things like that. It's actually pulling from a lot of different places. So you get a more complete picture. That's definitely one of the pros. One of the cons, I think, is it can potentially make you lazy. So my caution would be, don't just rely on that. You still have to pick through that data. You still have to know your keywords. You still have to be able to effectively filter. So the tool will do that for you, but you have to input the knowledge first. You have to tell it what you're looking for and really how to sift through all of that data. So, and then again, who does this really well? Lots of tools out there, Chrome extensions, all kinds of cool stuff you can play with. But I think what you're looking for first and foremost, think about your budget. Do you have a budget? Are there free tools that work for you? Is it worth the investment to do something like a business plan with some of these folks? And then really, again, just narrowing down massive, massive amounts of data to a short list. Any questions yet so far from the audience? So we're going to keep rolling. Okay. So communication, this is where we're going to step out of the automation for just a moment. We've got this short list, we've done our due diligence, we've created a pipeline. Now we want to engage those people. So the first rule of engagement is make it personal, right? So using that short list, using the data that's available on your top 20 people that you want to reach out to, send a personalized message. We all use email all the time. There may be different email tools that you can use, but be cautious of those because every candidate, every prospect should get a personalized message. I am not a fan of mail merge. I personally don't think any of us are that busy that we should send just broad 100 email blasts. I know some disagree with me, but in my world, that I'm not a fan. So, but I can take the hours that I saved in automating my short list and I can personalize it to that particular prospect. So once we now have the data, we've got the personal email address, we've drafted our message, we've hit on things we think are going to resonate with this particular prospect. Now we want to make it easy to talk back to us. So this is where automation can kick back in. So Ryan, we talked about My Ally and how they help coordinate communication. I use a tool in-house here at my company that helps with that. And it's very simple. It's just a matter of, hey, AI assistant, find me 30 minutes with this person. So it makes it very easy and it feels real for the prospects as well. They feel like there's somebody, an assistant or someone that is managing this instead of going back and forth in 15 emails later and then everyone's frustrated. There's other calendar tools that you can look at. So if an AI assistant is maybe not the best solution, lots of calendar tools where you can allow candidates or prospects to select time on your calendar. So those are definitely areas that you can use automation to your benefit. But again, don't lose the personalization. That far and away most important thing. Don't let the automation get in the way of the people element. So lots of great tools you can use, but definitely anything related to calendar scheduling, anything that helps communicate between you and your prospect, as long as you're starting from a place of personalization.
Yep. Now, Amy, we're getting some comments and some questions around what are some of the, or I don't know if you're going to get to this, but what are or how should a company, we're getting from a couple different people, so I don't know what some of their companies are, but how should a company start the process of weighing their options or looking at technology to bring in? What are those pillars that they need to look at? For example, assessment, awareness, communication, referrals, and marketing, and things like that.
Yeah, so I think you need to look at where your team is getting roadblocked. So if we were all running well-oiled recruiting machines, none of you would be listening to this webinar and I wouldn't have anything to talk to you about. The reality is that every company, every recruiting team has something that's not working. So, and for each company, it might be different, right? So smaller companies have, maybe it's a matter of branding and getting the name out there. For larger companies, maybe it's a matter of volume. So I think you first of all want want to really figure out, ask your recruiters, if I could give you a magic wand, you could change anything about the recruiting process and the way that you work today, what would that be? That's going to give you an idea of where you can make improvements. So if you were to ask me that question, I would say I need help in my world. I need help shortlisting. I've got tons of data. I've got a huge database full of amazing people. I need a better way to filter through that and figure out the best way to find the people that are the closest match, that are most likely to move, that are most receptive to my email or my phone call. So that for me would be my number one pain point. For someone else, it may be, I'm doing all of this manual scheduling. I'm chasing calendars. I can't ever, find people available at the right time. So if scheduling, and whether that's initial intakes, whether that's the full interview life cycle, whatever it may be, if the scheduling piece is where you're challenged, then that's when you're going to want to kind of start looking at the AI virtual assistants, the calendar help, Calendly add-ins, those kinds of things. So I definitely recommend starting from where are your people feeling the pain. You don't need an entire, this is not a package. You don't need to go in and buy one of everything to fit every single piece of the recruiting lifecycle. You need to start with where's my biggest pain, solve that, and then you can continue to refine in other areas if it makes sense. That was a really long-winded answer, but I hope it, it
Yeah.
addressed the question.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And so some of I'm getting some messages here. Um, and they're asking around if you had to kind of label, kind of put them down into pillars, what would we look at as far as areas of recruitment? And so let me just kind of clarify here. We're not, we can get into it, the really technical back end of how to make a tech buying decision. Um, but that's not, I don't think that's kind of where we're going here on the webinar. We certainly, I think, approach it talking about, for example, how mature is the software, what problems,
Yeah.
things like that. So just for those questions that are coming in there, we can answer some of those. We're looking more at the pillars, for example, if we're kind of narrowing it down, mobile, obviously,
Yeah.
right? Video is another big one, automation, which has a whole bunch of stuff lumped into it. So maybe we can kind of dig into that. And then obviously the newer social things and things that we can do there from the candidate experience, from that journey. But to answer some of those questions coming in, when I think of, because we just talked about automation the other day, when I think of automation, I'm not always just talking about, at least me, I'm not always just thinking about what can I do step to step to remove that process from a human, to speed things up. I look at it from another angle. We were talking the other day on, I think it was last week. I was on the webinar talking analytics, and one of the things we spoke about for a good part of it was conversion, right? What's some of the bigger reports that I like to look? I love conversion from stage to stage, step to step. How are we converting? What are we doing? When I look at automation, and I think this is important for people on the call, if you're looking to bring in software, bring in tech to help that sourcing, that recruiting, that marketing process, it's not just about the bells and whistles, right? It's about the product. Where's it going? What's the development look like? Not, I don't want to use roadmap, but what's the development look like moving forward? If they wind up losing, say, 7 developers on the product, can they replace those 7 developers and continue building and investing in that software before you make a huge investment? Because that's a big, not just from a dollars perspective, but training, time, effort, adoption, all of that stuff. But let me get about automation. I'm getting off topic here. On the automation piece, I look at things like the sales and marketing process in recruiting, right? And I think we're starting to see that now enter the recruiting, probably a couple of years now, but enter the recruiting process. Sales and marketing have been doing this for ages, controlling the candidate or the content journey, right? You read an article, you receive an ad, you engage with the ad, you get an email. You got the email, but you didn't do anything, you got a text message, right? And they're controlling that. Just think Amazon. You're browsing around, they give you recommendations, you put something in your cart, you go away. The next day, you're getting an email for 10% off to complete the purchase right now, right? It's it's that automation process to help drive that journey. And I think in recruiting, that's super important. So when you're bringing technology in, a CRM or think an ATS, right? Does the ATS have true CRM capabilities where you can create content, distribute content, control the journey of a candidate. Does it have scheduling and communication capabilities? Does it have the ability to text message or at least connect with tools that allow that process to take place?
Yeah. And
So
if you're affected by GDPR at all, are
yeah,
there compliance and policies in place that protect you for any kind of, whether if you're a global company or you're a UK-based company or something, there's a lot of rules around that these days. So automation and going back to like ATSs and those kinds of tools can also help. So if you're a company with a bigger budget, say, or have those, kind of in-house problems, think about that. You don't want to just go slap in a bunch of fancy new AI tools just because they sounded cool and then get your hand slapped.
yeah, definitely. And one thing, in the I don't probably know. I don't. I guess I'm just gonna say, don't fall in love with
Say
tech.
it.
Don't fall in love with technology.
Please
And
don't.
a tech guy. But
Right.
here's the thing. There's so many technologies on the market, right? And you're
Yeah.
gonna see 57 demos next week. If you fall in love with technology, that clouds your ability to really weigh your options and bring in the best technology for your process, right? You have to understand your process. That's
Yeah.
always the most important thing, because it's, and I was talking with Tinka, this is probably 2 weeks ago now, when we were looking to do we were doing, some of the stuff for the other webinar metrics and things like that. And he made a good point where it's, your needs are not the same as every company. So
For
you can
sure.
go Google 20 questions to ask when building a tech stack. Those questions may not work for you, right? Your identity is different than the next guy, right? So your process is going to be completely different. It may have some similarities, but it's going to be different. So your process is the most important thing in this entire process.
Hmm.
And I think it's important that everyone on call understands. You need to understand that in and out before you just go fall in love with a sourcing tool, because it can go find candidates. Because there's 20 others that can do exactly the same thing, maybe not as good, but
Yeah.
it fits
And
your
maybe not
process.
as relevant. If you're hiring truck drivers, you have a completely different pain point than someone like me who's hiring research scientists. There are our applicant pool and our prospects don't necessarily live in the same ecosystem online. So Brian is absolutely right. You can't just fall for the shiny new toy or the fanciest demo or the slickest marketing campaign. You have to really be clear. This is my process. This is how my recruiters, sourcers, coordinators function. This is where they're running into problems. This is what's keeping them up at night. And then how do we fix from that? So yes, it's not about our intention certainly wasn't to just say, hey, here's a bunch of tech, go put it together and make a stack. We really wanted to get people thinking about why am I building this stack in the first place? What I need to solve? How hungry am I for which part of the process? And then helping you know where to go from there and what to find. So
That's exactly right. A good point. In case Amy works for Microsoft, and I'm
yeah.
hoping I'm not going to get you fired here.
I hope not. I don't make that many cakes.
She works for Microsoft, but what kind of computer are you on?
I have a
Don't
Surface
answer
Book.
that if you can.
I have a Surface. I love my Surface Book. But I have an
Right,
iPhone too, because it works for me. And they talk
right.
to
It
each other,
works
so
for
it's
you.
all good.
Exactly. All right. We can get off that case. I'll stop talking. I'll let you continue on that.
Yes, let's not get me fired. Okay, so the communication piece, we really were thinking of this. In fact, I'm gonna step back for just a sec. We were thinking of this all the way through from, hey, you ended up on a short list, you're somebody we want to engage with. Now we're all the way through the interview and the offer process. So if there's one thing, and I really, this is important, so I'm gonna just get it out there. If there's one thing that you should never automate, it's the offer. There's a lot of ways to track the data or maybe input. It's really great if you have a really robust ATS where you can just kind of plug in the numbers and it spits out an offer letter. Like that would be super awesome. But the communication and the conversation between you and the candidate when it comes time to offer should never be left to a bot. I mean, I've heard people, HR tech folks or startup people talk about how they're just going to automate everything and it's going to be seamless from start to finish with no human interaction. I call bullshit. Can I say that? Can I say that on the RD webinar? I think so, right? No, I just think that's absolutely incorrect. And so please, when it comes down to finalizing the interview, lots of tech you can add in there, again, for scheduling purposes, but you still have to have that human element. How's it going? How can I help you prepare? By the way, here's an offer. Let's talk about it. So no communication, lots of communication there. So onboarding. So now we've gotten our person through the gauntlet. They have gone through all of the amazing AI stuff that's helping us complete the process, and now they've accepted, and now we're onboarding. So it's keeping the communication open. A lot of times there can be months between accepting an offer and actually joining the organization. So how are you keeping people warm during that time? One thing that I love to do, and this is just a really simple calendar hack, but I just put a little event on my calendar. Hey, check in, make sure they're still coming in 2 weeks. Hey, check and make sure the paperwork was signed. And so just using your calendar and just kind of scheduling those recurring things for your candidate as they're kind of finalizing the last leg. So that's one thing just from the recruiter seat. But then if you're looking more broadly, you're maybe an HR person, or you're leading recruiting and you're kind of responsible for getting them through the finish line. How are you managing that paperwork? If you could have a one-stop action center, and there are definitely third-party providers that do onboarding stuff. Some of us have in-house tools and things that we can leverage, but think about from the candidate experience perspective, how do I make this seamless? How do I give you, maybe there's a link, a personalized landing page where you know where you're going. It's links to maybe schools and neighborhoods, things like that. Think about what would a candidate appreciate, and how can we automate delivering that information to people in a scalable way? If you're hiring a lot, this is something you're going to repeat. So how can you utilize, whether it's AI or some other kind of HR tech tool, to keep that communication going? And then again, just having kind of that one-stop action center, that one place where a candidate can start their employment with you and kind of stay grounded with your company, super critical. So again, lots of third party. I've not used a third party provider, but they're definitely out there. But if onboarding, again, going back to your pain points, hey, we do really good until it's time to welcome in here, and then we have a massive fall off rate. What's going on there? What's happening in onboarding that we can clean up and streamline that might keep that from happening? Any questions from the audience? Anything else we've not covered that we were hoping we would today? I can't see the chat window, so I'm leaning on you, Ryan.
Yep. So, Lex, if we could gather up some questions that might be coming in, that'd be great, and just drop them in for us. So, guys, we've opened up the Q&A area on the webinar, so go ahead and drop any questions that you have in there. If you're building a tech stack, if you need help, what are some of those questions or process questions that you may have?
And what's working, what's not working. I think we talk a lot about, we're all bombarded with all the different HR tech tools, and everybody wants us to do demos. I mean, what would you like to see from these people? Our vendors are listening. Tell them what you want.
Yeah, so Amy, some of the questions coming in. So there was one, I think, around chatbots that Lex said had pushed in. So I'm going to get your thoughts on chatbots, and then there's a couple more that I can read off to you here.
Yeah, absolutely. So chatbots for recruiting is interesting, right? Because when I think of chatbots, when I think of how we're doing chatbots well in other areas, I think it's one of those things where if there are simple questions, if I think about it from like a customer service perspective, I want to know my account balance for my Macy's credit card, or I want to, what are the store hours, things like that. So are there kind of simple questions, or even going back to the scheduling, the calendar thing, are there simple things that a chat bot with the right kind of natural NLP influence and then kind of the right AI built into it, can we have those, kind of simple one-off, easy to engage questions? But I think more importantly, does that open up the recruiters to spend more time? I mean, if I, took every single easy phone call or every single easy email that could maybe be better answered by a chatbot, how much more time would I have for when, something needs more personal attention? So I think they're great in the right circumstances. I'm curious though how that would look for recruiting. I could see it maybe from a very early, like a career page. You know, if you have questions about here, chat with Cortana down here in this little window, ask her questions about, you know, what's it like to work at Microsoft or something. I think there's definitely some easy things that a chatbot could do, but it would be tough. A lot of this is very personal, one-to-one. I don't know how a chatbot would answer that.
Now, another question came in around where are a few key areas that we're going to see, or that we're seeing, meaning us, automation or recruitment automation taking place? And I can take a stab at that to start.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So I think I'm seeing it, you know, from everyone that I'm talking. I spend a lot of time talking to, not necessarily practicing today, but speaking with practitioners, with heads of talent, and as well as the vendors, in just understanding the space. And I think I'm seeing it in a couple of key areas. One is definitely in the automation of understanding the resume. And I'm hesitant to say, I guess, screening, right? But understanding the resume, because I think screening, and this is something, you know, to kind of gnaw on, you know, for everyone listening. I think, to me, there's a difference. Screening is something where they're just kind of scanning it, looking for keywords. Does it fit the criteria? Does it have a specific match level? When I'm talking about, you know, looking at resumes, but truly understanding the resume, the way it's written, what the sentiment is of the words written in the resume, things like that. I think automating that process is going to I think have an effect on recruiting process moving forward. I think and that's, I guess it's kind of pre-qualification, but understanding their pre-qualification process, and certainly on the interview section, helping to automate the coordination, the scheduling, running the interviews. I don't know that it's mature enough today to think about, you know, affecting the really mainstream or most important parts of your process. I think that still needs to be held close to the vest. I don't see that being the case in a couple of years, you know,
Yeah.
with just maybe 2 years. I mean, you know, I don't have a crystal ball here, but again, I think the screening process, the qualification process, interviewing and coordination, I think that right now is mature enough, and there's a lot of tools out on the marketplace that have made their case to help impact in that area. And I don't think that's replacing. We're getting some pushback here on replacing. It's not replacing the recruiters, right?
No.
There's a big difference. I know it's not, and this isn't just semantics and saying we're augmenting the process. So where does a recruiter go? It's helping it's legitimately helping the recruiter to get better, right? It's speeding up the process. It's helping with a number of things, you know, around quality of hire, the best hire, time to hire, all of those things that we think about each and every day. That's where it's going to take effect. And I think in those three key areas is where it's going to affect the most, at least for the short term.
Yeah, I mean, I probably shouldn't be so hard-nosed on this, but no good recruiter is getting replaced by AI, in my opinion. I don't see that happening. I think of it when I think about automation, and I think about, you know, a lot of recruiters who get nervous and think, well, you're trying to take my job or you're trying to take me out of the process. I think about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you know, Willy Wonka. Like, Charlie's dad worked at the toothpaste factory, and then they bought a machine and he lost his job, but he came back to fix the machine. Like, the machine's great, the machine's going to do so much, and the machine might be able to point out, yeah, hey, C#'s on that resume, but it still needs that human eyes, and it still needs someone to carry the candidates through, that get through that screening. And you know, screening kind of sucks, you know. I mean, it is a rejection game, and we do need to be really thoughtful in screening in versus screening out whenever possible. But even something like, I know there's companies that do this, that have pre-screen questions. So you apply to a role and you actually answer questions that are related to the requirements for this job. Do you have 3 years of experience in software development? Do you have, have you written in these coding languages, things like that? So that's another way just to help clean up that kind of intake process, so whether it's sourcing, screening applicants, whatever, and it allows you as the recruiter to spend that much more time in the quality work, which is actually talking to the candidates who are qualified and the applicants who've made it through the screening process. So it's all good in my opinion, and I agree with Ryan. I think the hottest areas right now are going to be um, the sourcing, so kind of initial data gathering, data cleanup process, and then the transactional interviewing stuff. So the scheduling, getting travel arranged, those kinds of things. Those things can be handed off to a piece of software or a tool, which allows us to spend quality time on the human side of it and the personal stuff.
Yeah, we were getting some questions on let me just read a couple of these off here. Let's see. If you're a team of under 25, what recruiting stack would you recommend? ATS sourcing tool, comp benchmarking tool, scheduling tools. So let's just take that, maybe not a team of 25. Let's just say smaller teams. What are some areas that you would recommend they look at from a technology standpoint for? I mean, certainly sourcing, right? So
Yeah.
let's start with the sourcing aspect of it.
Yeah.
You know, or let me see what recruiting stack. So I guess maybe they're talking about specific tools. I'm not sure here. You know, certainly sourcing, right? So let's start with
Yeah.
sourcing. What are some of the sourcing tools and that you might see that are out there, or some of the tech and some of the things that these tools are doing today that could help a smaller company?
Yeah, for sure. So when you say smaller company, I'm going to make a couple of assumptions. So this is your chance to tell me if I'm way off. I'm going to assume you probably don't have much budget for tools and probably have a wide variety of candidates you're pulling in. So smaller team, smaller company, that tells me you're probably recruiting a bunch of different folks across various technologies and skill sets and that kind of thing. So you're going to want to look for, first of all, where are my people hiding? Maybe you can get by with LinkedIn. LinkedIn's great. It's a valuable tool for a lot of people, not for some, and that's okay. But can you leverage kind of the things that are publicly available? Does that work for you? If you're a small team, maybe you're like some weird unicorn techie startup, and maybe you need a really robust like a hire tool, which has this amazing AI sourcing element where it digs into all of this amazing tech talent. So it's kind of when I used it, it seemed very great for technical talent. So look at things like that. But then also, again, I would just have to say, where are your recruiters complaining? Where are they having trouble? And I think for smaller companies, and this was my experience when I worked for a smaller company, my biggest single pain point was scheduling. I hated scheduling. I hated chasing 5 and 6 people a day to figure out when they could meet candidates. So the scheduling piece for me was an absolute nightmare. And if you would come to me and say, hey, we're going to invest in this great calendar management system that's going to take this off your plate, that I would love that. So I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but you got to ask your people where do they
Yes,
need help?
yeah, certainly. Yeah, I think that the scheduling piece, the coordination, that entire process, and I think that's the sweet spot right now for this technology to help make recruiters better. It's that
Yeah.
part of the process that, frankly, it's not worth the salary, the investment in the recruiter to handle that process. That's
Yeah.
not going to where I think it can affect, obviously, it's going to make the experience better if you have the right tool. But I think on the flip side there, if the recruiter's not great at scheduling,
Yeah.
then the experience is just shot to hell.
Yep.
And frankly, you lose the candidate at that point. So there's a bunch of other questions coming in, but one of the other things around automation, somebody was asking for situations where we can run, let me just see, recruitment marketing to engage with your talent pools, keeping them warm and things like that. So I'll take a stab at this here. I think there's a ton of use cases for this. And if you just think, again, taking it outside of recruiting, put your marketing hat on, just go Google marketing automation, and you're going to see what a lot of recruiters don't understand, right? And I know some recruiters are on the call saying, shaking head, oh, no, I get it. But really dive deep and take a look. Think about your talent pools, all that work you're doing, and all those candidates you're pushing through, be it through paid ads, distribution, or webinars, or whatever you're doing to build your talent list, your pool. Some of the ways that I would recommend looking at automation to help with event registration, send
Yes.
updates on events. A really good way is, and this is something that when we work with companies, we help them to master this process to really identify what we call them leads, but to identify the talent or the lead in this case that is engaging with your content. If your company, has a blog, for example, or a resource center, and you're getting 5,000 people a month to read your content, you need to understand not just where those people are coming from, but you need to physically know, who they are, right? You need them in your database. So you need an automation process in place to help identify the lead, enhance the lead, so you have all of their contact information. And then the ability to then reach out to them and get them into a program where you're controlling that, or presenting them with, presenting them with the best content experience that you can to move them into a buying process, or in your case, a hiring process, right? Interested in a job. Another way would be loyalty, right? So your recruiters have spoken with these people. We all know the silver medalist approach, right? Automate that process. You don't need. I mean, how many people do you say? Well, I've got 400 silver medalists. Realistically, how many of those people actually get reached out to? Now, some companies that have this process set up are doing it all the time. Others that don't, think of the money, the time, the hiring everything that is just not happening, that experience, right? So the ability to follow up with them, follow up with applicants, with silver medalists, connect with them after the events with webinars, run webinars, training sessions like this, all of this type of stuff. And one more example, because it's completely not recruiting related, but it's automation related. My dentist, what a major pain in the ass they are, right? I love that. To me, I love the process. My wife hates it, right? I love it because when I go in and I go through my appointment. When I leave and they schedule an appointment with me, I get email, I get text messages, I get follow-ups, I still get a hard postcard in the mail, all throughout from the time I leave until my next appointment. I get reminders. I get little tips on how to, whatever service I went in for, if I went in for a cleaning or if they had to do some other work. They put me into a content program that's based around the work for that specific appointment that I just had. So for the next 3 months before my next follow-up, I'm constantly getting messages, phone calls, text messages, whatever it is, even postcards, helping me along with that process. So if
Yeah.
they gave me a 5-step checklist, make sure you do this for the next 3 months, and they know you're not going to do it. But when they send you a postcard, they said, hey, next week you need to do A. Then you get one the week after, you need to do B. Like, they're reminded, it costs them a little bit of money, but I keep going back and I keep doing it. Ultimately, it's making my mouth healthier, right? And that's just the recruiting process. If a dental office can do it, you can do it within any size of a company, big or small, and increase that engagement. And just think about, even small percentages. If you have, say, 50,000 candidates or past candidates in your database, take 5% of that, take 10% of that. What can you do with another 5,000 engaged people that are clicking around on your stuff? That's where I think the automation today can be huge. Give them that, that ability to click, read your content, and then get them into that scheduling and automation process. Look, if they've engaged with 3 pieces of content or watched 2 videos, why shouldn't they speak with a recruiter?
Yeah.
Or why shouldn't the recruiter get an alert to say, Amy, Ryan just watched these 3 videos over the last 3 weeks and clicked these 2 emails. Go check them out. Here's her updated LinkedIn profile.
Absolutely. And it's a great way to, even once you land them and you're in onboarding, hey, 2 weeks out, did you fill out this? Did you, are you ready for that? So there's lots of places that you can input some of those reminders, and whether it's a super fancy formal, AI marketing solution, or even just, kind of different calendar hacks. So yeah, there's a lot of ways that this is where I think recruiters fall into one of two camps. Either they're completely like against technology and they still had, that fear of, oh, I'm going to lose my job if I implement this. Or on the other side, where I'm going to just buy all the shiny tools and I'm going to make everything work for me, and then nothing works. So the answer is definitely somewhere in the middle. There's lots of great ways to use technology. Speaking of scheduling, we talked about that, but even setting up technical screens. How many of us are trying to figure out ways to do electronic whiteboards, and there's, different tools that are out there for that, but just something that, again, makes it push button easy. I'm sending a quick email. This software is going to then send out the invites and create the landing page, and have all this queued up, send the reminders ahead of time, that kind of thing. That's when I'm thinking about the kind of the ideal tech stack. It's building in stuff like that, not a bot that has all my conversations for me.
Got it. Perfect. All right, let's see if we have a bunch more, but let me see where we are
Awesome.
on time. Yeah, we're running down on time here. Let's see. Oh, hiring solved. Lex, what was the question about hiring solved?
Just that it was mentioned, if it was mentioned or talked about, someone had recommended it.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, so hiring solved obviously would fall into that sourcing piece. And there's a lot of great tools out there for
Tons.
sourcing. Hiring solved is certainly one of them. Amy, I think you mentioned Hire
Hire
Tool.
tool. Big fan.
There's Seek Out's another really
Yes.
strong one
I
that's out
saw a
there.
demo for Seek Out. It looks great.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good tools out there. What I'd recommend, I mean, we don't have the answers there because what your need for sourcing is going to be different. So Hire Tool is fantastic in these key areas. Hiring Solve's good for these. Seek Out's going to be better in another area. I think what I would recommend is before you get on demos, understand what your need is and take that time. It should only take you 30 minutes, right? 40 minutes, something like that, depending on who has to be involved. But brainstorm that out and have a list of what you need, what you potentially need, what you don't need. And the way you get to that is, rather than just making a list of here's the 30 things I need, here's the 30 things I don't need. List out what your problems are. What are you trying to solve for? And that will then tell you the features that you're going to need. And look, frankly, if you don't know the features, you're not techie, don't worry about that.
Yeah,
Build out, brainstorm what solution or what problems you're trying to solve for, and then go find some tools
absolutely.
and demo and ask them the questions. Here's what I'm trying to solve for. Show me how you can help me solve it. And then go to the 4, 5, 6, 10, whatever it's going to be. Go out there and find those tools and ask them to tell you how they're going to help you solve for the problems, because you're not going to have all those answers.
Yep. And there's two things that I would caution you on that. So number one, don't do everything at once. Don't say, okay, I'm going to go solve 5 different problems. I have 5 areas of my recruiting life cycle that suck and are painful, and I'm going to go demo everything and buy 5 different solutions. One at a time. Because one of the questions that's going to come up after that is, does this integrate with my next thing? And so you want to be, Ryan mentioned earlier about, is this company stable? Can they maintain it? Can they continue to update it? Is it going to fold tomorrow? Those kinds of things. So solve your biggest problems first. Make sure you're finding stuff that's going to integrate well with anything you already have, anything you might be considering in the future. And then once you get really good at that, then you move on to the next piece of your stack, and then you solve the next problem. If you're trying to do too much at once, your recruiters are going to run out of the building crying, and they may not come back. Not that I know this from experience or anything.
Yeah. So, all right, so we are running out of time. So for those of you that are still on the call, here's what I would say. Build out your set of problems, figure out what you're trying to solve for, and then go identify tools within that category and ask them how they can help you solve. That's going to be, I think, the key thing. And again, the 3 key areas that we would recommend here is the qualification process, obviously the screening or review process, and then the interviewing and scheduling and coordination process, things like that. Keep it simple. I do want to, before we jump off, I do want to let everyone know, check your inbox shortly. We have a webinar this Thursday as well. We're doubling up this week. We're going to be presenting with Dean DaCosta. It's going to be it's one of our more popular webinars. It's all about recruiting tools, sourcing tools, Chrome extensions, all this type of stuff. So if you're gadgety and you like to learn about tech and things like that, and see Chrome extensions and tips and tricks, this is going to be the webinar for you. So check your inbox. We're going to send that out so you can obviously register there. And that's it. So
Awesome.
thank you. Yeah. So thank you all for joining. Also, in your inbox, we are going to send a demo opportunity for My Ally. I would highly, highly recommend it to check them out. Among others, there's many others that are out there, but give them a shout. Check out the demo and see some of these tools in action for yourself, and see if they can actually help you. And I'd be interested. Feel free to respond back and let me know. Be interested to get your feedback and include that in some of our updates and follow-up articles and things like that.
Absolutely.
Amy, thank you so much
My
for
pleasure.
joining.
Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
No, thanks for coming on, and thank you everybody for showing up. And we'll see you next time.